Hi, Maurice. How are you?
Hey, Sofie, doing well. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm really excited and interested to have this conversation with you.
Yeah.
For people joining, I'm Sofie. I am with NVC Academy. I do outreach and programs coordination. And for people not knowing NVC Academy, we are an international hub promoting online learning and education in nonviolent communication. And we will have this conversation with Maurice because he has an upcoming course with us starting March 6th. It's called Bringing Self-Empathy into Conversations about Race, Racism, Privilege, and Power. And the dynamics of this conversation is I will ask some questions to Maurice, and please put your questions and comments in the chat. And at the end of our 20-30 minutes conversations, we will attend them. So Maurice, I like first very briefly introduce you. You're an educator, speaker, wellness consultant, and youth development professional with more than 20 years of experience. You're founder of Mansa Consulting, and you're a certified trainer in nonviolent communication. Can you tell us something about your consultancy practice and your organization for people who never heard about you?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to be here. And number one, I started Mansa Consulting because I was a high school and a middle school teacher for about 11 years. I taught social studies in Cleveland, Ohio, and also in Los Angeles, California. And I realized in that transition, I learned about nonviolent communication, the awareness of needs and creating community and creating a sense of healing and interdependence in my classroom. I realized that the young people that were attending schools, they had more needs, so many needs that were being unmet and not acknowledged in the school system. Compassion, love, connection, and growth. So I started my mentoring consulting business to work outside of my classroom on Saturdays with families of color, Black and Hispanic families, single moms. I taught them NVC consciousness. I taught them leadership skills, and I taught them a lot around self-mastery. So that just grew. So again, my business came out of education, it came out of mentoring, and it came out of youth, my love for youth development. So now it's extended to me speaking all over the world, in the country. It extended to me doing a lot more around mindfulness and wellness. I do a lot around cultural consciousness and anti-racism work. And but it all stemmed from kind of sharing and noticing not just individual needs, but systemic needs that were not being met for Black and brown kids in the institution of schooling.
Thank you. I'd like to jump in with like a core question related to your upcoming course. Having a conversation about racism, it's hard. It triggers a lot of emotions. How do we do this? And like, if people take your course, what will they get away with?
Yeah. So, having conversations are, like you said, are not easy, but it's all about creating skill and creating capacity. So what you'll walk away with is not an answer to race, but some more capacity, some more skill to confront the racism that lives within you, and confronting the racism that lives within our societies by talking it out with each other. So I'm very trained in NVC. I've been speaking and living and practicing NVC consciousness for over 15 years. And I learned that you can use the skill of self-empathy or empathy to really translate your own personal judgments into observations of your own values, how you see the world. And NVC is about creating that quality of connection. But when you're talking about racism, something that's systemically and structurally put in place for hundreds of years and generations, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of of resentment. There's a lot of intense emotions. So when you integrate nonviolent communication skills, as we talk about systemic structures, you always have that capacity to pause and clarify your values from your perspective, and pause and clarify the person you're having a conversation about, their perspectives as well, because we have the technology to empathize with the system and to also empathize with ourselves. So I love NVC in conjunction with talking about systemic racism.
Mm-hmm. And for people like watching us and maybe who are not so familiar with nonviolent communication, can you give us an example?
A definition?
Like an example of a situation in which you heard or received a hard to hear message, a racist message. Like, how do you do it? How do you receive it?
Yeah.
Applying nonviolent communication, just like, because I see people joining us who are not familiar with nonviolent communication, who are not familiar with the first steps. Could you give us like a brief illustration or an example? How does it work?
Yeah. So nonviolent communication is a language or a process of communication that creates natural giving from the heart. But oftentimes when we're communicating in relationships or in our work or workspaces, sometimes we get stuck because someone says something that we cannot receive because it causes a lot of pain in us. So hard to hear messages if someone says something that stimulates pain within you. And when an NVC says you have 4 ways to respond to any type of message. Number 1, you can internalize it and blame yourself. I'm a bad person. I'm not good enough. Number 2, you can judge and you can lash out and blame the person for making that statement. Like something is wrong with you. Number 4 speaks to the heart of NVC or nonviolent communication, is self-empathizing, really getting in touch with your own heart, which means connecting to your feelings, your and then connecting your feelings to your values, what's important to you, and also stopping. And number 4 is kind of really hearing beyond what people say and connecting to their feelings and their values. So a hard to hear message that was said to me by one of my colleagues. I was in a workspace. We were working at the same nonprofit. And I think we were writing curriculum, or we were writing some sort of curriculum for some sort of manual. And he was proofreading my work, and then he says, Morris, was your schooling enough? The school that you went to, did you feel like that school prepared you? And I was like, his name was Bill. I said, Bill, what do you mean? He said, because it doesn't seem like your writing is good enough to write for us to write in this manual. So that was a hard to hear message. He said my writing wasn't good enough in the manual, and then he questioned my schooling. So if we pause right there, right, I have 4 ways I can respond. And if we talk about racism, that was a racist thing to say. I'm a black man, and I don't think you would question anybody else's writing, because everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Nobody was an expert at the organization. So I hope those that are listening, you're seeing the complexities of our interactions, and especially when we talk about not just culture and class, but race, right? Race. So it was a white older man. I'm a younger black guy. So I have 4 ways to respond. Initially, I did choose 1. I felt bad about myself, because if you talk about internalized racism, us as African Americans and other people of color, we're trying to assimilate into society. We're trying to assimilate into a lot of white spaces. So there's a lot of pressure to fit in, right? And to be smart. So initially it was like, man, something must be wrong with me. And then I went to two, like, no, something must be wrong with him. How could he be so insensitive? We knew each other. We had a good relationship. But why would you be so insensitive to say something like that to me? So that was two. Like, I was mad because I felt like he was insensitive and I felt like he was racist. So that's two. And then three, we didn't have a conversation. But three could have been the conversation where Bill, like, I'm so curious to hear you say that. I'm wondering, I need some clarity. Like, I want to understand, like, could you tell me, why you had a conversation with me about my writing when I just made a mistake? So you're curious when you're in number three, you express your feelings and your values. I'm curious, I need clarity, and I want to understand, like, why would you, say something about my writing when everybody's doing the same sort of writing in the manual? And then four, you can listen to what he responds with and say, okay, I'm assuming that you really were surprised maybe when you see me as somebody as intelligent and I made a few mistakes. And then I can respond with, well, Bill, you got to understand as well, like, I've never heard you talk to anybody else about their writings. Mm-hmm. So for me, it violates my value of respect and dignity as an African-American person. So so the four ways creates an awareness so you can know if you're coming from a place of, like, if you're coming from a place of internal blame, external blame, or you're really expressing, like, your values based on the interaction of what you've seen and how you've interpreted based on your feelings, or you can always hear their values based on what they say as well.
And in the end, how did you answer? Or how did the conversation end up?
Well, sometimes you just, in that particular situation, there was no immediate solution. Like I said, I didn't confront him about it. Just as a situation like all of us, I got clarity on my own. Mm-hmm. I did a self-empathy practice where I realized, if there was some internal racism coming up in me about my own value and my work. So I kind of got clarity about where I was coming from, what I needed to let go in that situation. I think I needed confidence within myself. So I didn't even feel the need in that scenario to about what he said. I think I offered my self-empathy, which I understood my own feelings and my own values, and then I moved on. So you have a choice, because this is not always about confronting somebody if you're not ready. You can also get the self-empathy. What did I notice about that conversation? What did I really feel? What do I value? And sometimes value is protection. Sometimes value is support. So in this communication, you have choices. It's not about attacking somebody or shutting down. It's about really offering yourself empathy and connecting to your values so you can decide on what you need to do. I love it.
Yeah, to illustrate it this way, this is, the course is about bringing self-empathy into these conversations, right? So I think we addressed this part, and it's really interesting. Maurice, who is this course for? Who could benefit from this course?
Yeah. So any person who's interested in going a bit deeper in having conversations about racism or inequity, anyone who needs support, whether you're white or Black or indigenous, who needs that support, who needs someone to help them realize if you're a Black person or a person of color, you're not crazy. You're not crazy, because oftentimes people of color, we walk around and we suppress all of our feelings, because if we do sometimes express ourselves, the white establishment will label us as a troublemaker, as rebellious. So if you just kind of need a space, even to come to my workshop and just share your raw anger and frustration and righteous indignation at just trying to live and survive in the system, this is for you. And on the other side, if you're white and you want to learn more and be more aware about having these type of conversations, or just realizing where you're at in terms of having conversations about racism from a place of empowerment, or maybe you shut down and feel ashamed and guilty.
Yeah.
So this is for everyone who really wants to confront racism, whether you're from the privileged side or the targeted side of race relations in this country. But we have these conversations from a connected place. You can have conversations about injustice, about inequality from the heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And me, having worked many years in NGOs and doing social work, I in our first conversation, I asked you also about this course be interested in for social workers, for people who work in NGOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Anywhere you have a group of people that are doing the work, that are providing the service for other folks, it's important for people to understand how to confront each other. Even that word confrontation, right? Some people see confrontation as violence, but I see confronting people as an opportunity to build trust. I've been in a lot of situations working in a lot of nonprofit organizations where people thank me for my direct approach, even though it makes you feel nervous and uncomfortable. But to know what somebody's thinking and to know what somebody's feeling really creates a healthy working relationship.
Yeah.
So how can we do this work at these NGOs and these nonprofits and healthcare and education and law, and politics, if we don't have a working, healthy relationship of safety, of trust, and respect? That's just the basics.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is about this unique offer you're bringing, because I was in your session in the NVC conference last Saturday, and I saw you have this amazing energy. People really got like very inspired. I saw the energy on their faces and they were so happy. So I want to share this experience with the people who are joining us.
Yeah.
And also maybe we also said like NVC or nonviolent communication and the workshops there exist in the world. We do a lot of talking, sitting down, being rather maybe serious, but I think your course is different. Could you tell something more like how do you integrate music, storytelling, movement in your offer?
Yeah, so who's to say that we can't have fun and bring creativity and imagination when we confront systemic racism and injustices from a place of empathy, from the heart, from a heartfelt connection.
Yeah.
And it's important to be authentic in whatever you do in life. This is my calling. Like, my calling is to empower people, is to help people heal, but my calling is also to confront injustice. So oftentimes the body, it lives in fear. 75% of humans live in survival and stress. That means you're waiting to shut down, you're waiting to run away, you're waiting to fight because you've been living in fear for so long. Hey, so when we start off with some movement practices, because I also believe in integration, I practice mindfulness meditation, also with my conscious awareness of my feelings and my needs. So moving the body gives you an opportunity to settle the mind and the thoughts. So when you also add music and you tell stories and you laugh, when you start to have a more serious, intense conversation, the body is settled and the mind is attuned to what's going on in your inner experience and your outer world. So again, it creates that capacity and that sense of peace. When you get confronted, then you go back to what we did with the body, and then it's easier to have these conversations. So the practices of mindfulness and movement, it grounds your nervous system. But you have to do this over time, so then your body doesn't naturally react to fear.
Great. Thank you, Maurice.
You're welcome.
These were my questions. And people, please find the link to register for Maurice's course starting March 6th on a Monday at 4 Pacific time in the afternoon in our bio, and also our last last post on our Instagram account is about Morris's course, and you can find all the information here. Space for questions. And somebody asked already a question before our session. The question is, what's the difference between a racist comment and a comment that is culturally insensitive?
Now, remember, I don't necessarily get into a lot of semantics. I like, so if somebody was in my workshop and somebody believes that the comment was racist, I create space and offer them empathy for that being racist as it shows up to them. Then if somebody believes that the statement was, you said, culturally insensitive, I'll allow space for that. I mean, my honest opinion, they're interrelated, right? If somebody is culturally insensitive, you can say that they're unaware, or it's like unconscious bias or hidden racism, right? Or if somebody is outright racist, it could be some intent behind that or non-intent behind that. So there's a lot of layers and nuances to these terms: culturally insensitive, racism, microaggressions. But I think that's why NVC is so important, because you take something like culturally insensitive, and if somebody was standing in front of me or sitting in front of me, now I would ask for more details about that situation, then which can help me unpack the situation from observations, feelings, and needs. Because I think racism comes from a system of advantages and a system of power. We as Black people feel like we cannot be called racist because racism is a system of advantages based on race, based on a concept of whiteness. If we talk about cultural insensitivity, if you're culturally insensitive, then culture could be your language, it could be dress, it could be food, it could be types of thinking. So I think that creates a bit more room when you talk about cultural insensitivity versus racism. So that was just my take on that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if there are more questions. I see a lot of comments, but not really questions.
That's fine.
Here there is a question. When you feel the sting of a race or expression from someone, how do you forgive them in the moment and keep the connection to their needs and traumas?
Yeah, that's a question. A sting of a racist look or expression. And again, this is when I said earlier, we're not crazy. And oftentimes living in this society, it could that pressure of not belonging can make you feel, like you're crazy. So I would always, if this question is from your personal experience, it just varies. I mean, for me, how I deal with racism is I always, make space for how I feel in my body. So before I try to tend to anyone and forgive anybody, I'm tending to myself first as a Black man in this country. So if I feel a real emotional charge in my body, if it's like a stranger or something like that, then I'll just, do some breaths. I'll just pause and make sure I ground myself and acknowledge, hey, like, am I really hurt or am I really activated by a situation? I'll try to pause and kind of soothe my nervous system. But there's no way that I'm tending to somebody else who I interpret their actions as racism in a one-on-one encounter. I don't have any control over that person. I've had many situations where I've been called the N-word, where I've had people, white men, say aggressive words at me and wanted to just kind of get me out of the way. But so in those situations, I'm tending for myself. I'm not trying to tend to the other person. In that situation, forgive them in a moment. Yeah. And then how I forgive them overall, if you want to really talk about forgiveness, I just maybe hold space from them being conditioned a certain way, not to love people that are different from them. So I can hold space for them through my practice, but I'm tending to myself and my own needs first. That was the best I can do. That's a tough one. But thank you for asking. Appreciate the honesty.
And I'm reading the comment from Rosie. So often NFPs and NGOs think that they can be racist because they serve marginalized folks. They don't recognize they're still part of a racist system and due to the same racist things as we all do.
Is there a you want me to answer? I see a few more questions.
No, it's a comment from Rosie.
Okay.
Question. Yeah.
But I see Troy Elliott has a question. Is that the next question? You see it?
It was here in the session. Yeah, I'm scrolling down.
You said some Troy
There's
Elliott.
Another question, of course. Yeah. What's your opinion of unconscious bias training and its effectiveness against racism?
Oh, I'll answer that because it was the one before that. It says, and I'll answer that. It says, how do you deal with trauma you received from enduring racism in the workplace? I left the corporate world, but resentment still lingers. Yeah, brother. You know, thank you for this question. Resentment still lingers in the body, you know, and you know when we have been traumatized, you know, from race, you know, it goes back to taking care of yourself. You know, obviously, to meet your need for healing, to meet your need for care, care of your spirit, your mind, you decided to move on. So I think that's one, right? You know, deciding to remove yourself from those situations. And then again, part two is to move slowly, you know, and mindfully in this society, because, you know, trauma is not necessarily what happened, but it's our body's protective response to what happened. I'll say it again. Trauma is not necessarily, a lot of traumatic things have happened to us as individuals and as people of color, but it's how we respond, right? We want to fight back, or we want to run away or shut down. So the only way you can recondition your body is through kind of the mindfulness work, the self-awareness work, and confront. I mean, this is my advice. In certain situations, if you feel capable, for me, using my interpersonal effectiveness skills in those moments has helped me. And if the moment is too big, just kind of retreat and take care of myself, you know, and continue to heal the body, you know, exercise, mantras, the daily meditation can allow you to get back, you know, to a place of peace and resonance. So that's what I would say for that. And what is your opinion of unconscious bias training? Well, for me, you said, what is my opinion? I like the word anti-racism. For me, that's me, because I like to confront it. I don't like to, I mean, you know, unconscious bias training everything is good. Let me say that. Everything is effective, right? But it just depends on how it's delivered and how it's received. So my surface answer is I would prefer, you know, anti-racism work, because to me, unconscious bias is more, it's kind of, you're expressing it more in a lighter sense. But when we really talk about systemic racism and the impact of systemic racism historically in our institutions, in our families, and in ourselves, it creates a bigger impact when you name it as the systemic racism, not because bias could be deemed as like a personal thing. So I like to go with systemic and then integrate the personal over the personal and then integrating the systemic. So hope that was clear.
And then there is another question by Annie. If you are familiar with rejection, sensitivity, diasphoria, can you comment on how to attend to it if it appears from within ourselves?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with rejection, sensitivity, or is it dysphoria? And you comment on how to into it. Is it? I might need a bit more clarity on that one. Is it just a? Let me see. Is it just a form of internalized guilt or self-hatred? I've never heard of that word. I mean, I could talk about rejection sensitivity from a standpoint of a lot of our when we talk about racism, whatever side you're on, I know from systemically, a lot of white people feel like this guilt and this shame, you know, and a lot of us like Black people, and we feel a need to kind of project, you know, your feelings of guilt and shame. So I think it's about ownership. Like whatever comes up for you, that's what's great about nonviolent communication. You have an opportunity to notice what shows up in you. You know, notice the thoughts, notice the beliefs, patterns from your past. Notice how it you know it impacts the body, and then create space, connecting that to whatever values you hold dearly, and kind of continue to work through it. Obviously, if there's any type of rejection sensitivity, you feel it through the body. So I would say continue to notice patterns in the body, and create, you know, self-empathy practices to go from these beliefs, these negative belief patterns that don't serve you, translate those to feelings and then values. I think that will help address any sort of rejection and sensitivity dysphoria. That was my take on that.
Okay. And I see 2 more people joined. We are ending this conversation, but we will share it on our feed. Maurice, I want to thank you for this, your time, your energy. And yeah, people who like to join, please click on the link in our bio on our profile. And the landing page of the course, we will start March 6th, Monday, March 6th at 4 in the afternoon Pacific time. Thanks a lot, Maurice. See you.
All right. Thank you. All right.